Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have with me a very special guest on the show today who is different from my usual guests, and you'll find out exactly how. So, she is a former nurse turned body whisperer, and she's the chief energy officer of her own company called Path to the Heart. And I'm super excited to introduce Tammy Cho.
Thanks for having me, Marina. I'm happy to be here and just speak to your people and share my wisdom for everyone.
Yes, it is so amazing. We met recently through some networking and we found that we had so much in common, including the journey from like the more allopathic and corporate world into the more holistic area. And you're doing such amazing things in the psycho spiritual world, as you call it. And I'm just so excited to kind of learn about the steps that you took along your journey and how you became who you are today and what you do. So, why don't we just start out with where you were born, where you grew up, and how you came to be a nurse in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. My name is Tammy Cho, and I'm born in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And my journey started essentially, I was a registered nurse for 20 years and also in the psycho-spiritual. I was always really interested in this world. But my story really started when one day I was literally on the phone with a patient and everything felt normal within myself. And I suddenly started having chest pain and heart palpitations that radiated up my jaw and down my arm. And I was like, really hearing this fuzzy sound in my ears and I was struggling to breathe, the full works. And I just ended up being wheeled off to emergency in front of everyone at work. And, that was a really big wake up call for myself. Essentially, I wasn't having a heart attack, but I was having a panic attack and burning out. Um, that really, made me slow down, obviously. But it wasn't a place that I started my journey. I still needed that extra, hit on the head for myself to know that I was like not doing well. My daughter was 6 months old at that time, and our kids are such gifts to us, right? And she lay there on the baby Einstein mats with the hanging toys, and she intentionally hit one of the hanging toys for the first time, Marina. And if it wasn't for this community nurse that's next to me, seeing how I was so disconnected to the fact that my baby did something intentional for the first time, I would have known how disconnected I was to my own child. And yeah, this really made me start my journey. And obviously doing therapy and counseling on all of these things. But I also ventured into really like personal development left and right. It became this personal development junkie, trying to master the mind, became an NLP practitioner, ran all these masterminds, and even became a millionaire at that point through real estate and such. But I was still so unhappy when I actually slowed down. And I was still nursing at this time. And I ventured into exploring deeper into doing energy work. And, I got all my certifications, professional training, intuition and shamanism, bioenergy healing. And, when I was honest with myself and I stopped exchanging healings 2 to 3 times a week, I still was suffering with underlying generalized anxiety and depression. And I was still actually going through the cycles of burning out. And so because I value truth and authenticity, I really kept on going and I ventured into really diving into 4 years of deep emotional and spiritual healing. And then to psychosomatic therapy, which is essentially the study of the body, mind, heart, soul connection. And this is where everything came face to face with myself, where I saw like it speaks to a craft that I use that is about face and body reading. And it highlighted on my face, on my body, face everywhere, where I was reaching for this love, but I was also pushing it away. And it really came face to face with myself. And this is the only way I was able to heal all these things with no medication. And just by really standing into this authentic leadership and being really radically honest with myself. And it was a beautiful journey that I would never turn back, Marina, because it allowed me to tap into all these facets of body, mind, heart, soul, where I could help my clients to navigate and not just to heal just by mindset or by emotions, but bringing the whole self together. And so this is what I'm passionate about. And now I help high achievers, leaders, professionals to step into their authentic self leadership and energy so they could actually open and receive what they want. Because, Marina, let me tell you, a lot of people are actually blocking away everything they're investing their money on, and they don't even know it. And yeah, and that was me. And so, yeah, this is why I do what I do, Marina.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you really kind of just drove us into the heart of the matter, and really like I can sense like the depth of your journey and what you went through. And it sounds like, it was that personal awakening that allowed you to tap into your own gifts and what you're now sharing with the world, and how you're healing and elevating other people, and seeing through their blocks and helping them through their challenges based on your experience, which is a lot of the times what I find in my guests is they have, something personal that they went through that drives their deep desire and motivation to serve in the way that they're choosing to serve. And I think you described that beautifully with the authenticity and the leadership and coming face to face with yourself. And, a lot of people like subconsciously perhaps don't want to go there, right? Because it's deep, right? And we're taught to kind of like, just have a nice job, have a nice life, get money, but like you said, even like becoming a millionaire and, being a nurse and having all of these things, there is still an underlying pattern that you were working through. And I think at this point, I would love to hear your perspective on like, what is that key piece perhaps that made you even want to go into nursing in the first place? And then what was missing that, you had to keep searching for?
Yeah, like honestly, when I went into nursing, like I came from a lot of trauma and I really wasn't able to make a lot of decisions by myself. And I really became a really deep people pleaser and trying to be that perfectionist. And so actually I didn't really spend a lot of thought choosing what I want. I was choosing what my parents wanted. And literally, I just kind of went down a list of occupations that were given to us as students. And it's like, oh, and this was in high school. And I just literally, yeah, went with the flow, so to speak. But it was always obviously behind the scenes perfect for me. But at the time, I wasn't in a place of power within myself. But I went into nursing because I cared. And I cared for my grandma at the time who raised me when my mom had left me when I was a baby. And so I was very much a really good caregiver naturally, I felt. And so that's what brought me into nursing. And, honestly, I was a nurse for 20 years before I left. And I really, evolved into different nursing careers, into a leadership role, overseeing the hospital, to being like at the bedside as a nurse with a client, a patient at the time, right? So I had a big range. And what I realized that a part of me knew that I was meant for more. There was something inside of me that was telling me, there was more. I didn't even know how to put languaging around it, but there was just this small light amongst the depression I was experiencing. And yeah, that kept me lit. It was bright enough, even it was very dim at the time, but it kept me lit up to keep on going and moving towards something. And I didn't know what that was. Um, yeah, and within nursing, I was doing really well. I was like, obviously this high achiever. I looked really good on the outside and high functioning. And I think it's important to realize that a lot of people are high functioning and still have depression. And so you're not alone if you're out there. And that was me as a nurse. And that started me. I actually did part-time as a nurse for a while before I totally moved over into what I do now full-time. And so it was a process. It wasn't necessarily a decision right in the middle, Marina. I'm sure your journey was probably somewhat similar to this.
Yeah, everything is a process, right? And for me, I think the curiosity is about, what specifically was that spark, right? Like that kept you going. And why was it important to you specifically, like to follow that, right? To follow that in maybe inner wisdom or intuition, right? And specifically, you mentioned like drug free, right? Like a drug less path to self-actualization, or, to at least self-discovery, right? Which is always unfolding. And so why were those things important to you?
Yeah, I just like and some of these things, it's like part of my inner being knew. Like even when I had my kids, I had both kids without medication. And it wasn't that there's a time and place for medication and all those things. I think we could agree. And for myself, it was just important. And it's like something in our essence of our soul for me that I knew that that didn't feel right. That didn't feel aligned, even though my mind was saying all these things, you know? And like I said, the spark wasn't something I could really, put languaging around at that time. However, as I ventured on my own healing and removed more layers around my heart, I saw myself more. I saw my gifts. I saw what was possible. When I did the energy work, I realized I was an empath and I had these gifts and I could heal the room. And this download came into the room at that time that you're meant to do this. And it's like all the little crumbs started laying in our path, in my path, and most of our paths, if we know how where to look and how to like be aware of it, right? And so it's like it's inner calling. I think a lot of people call it. And yeah. And as I just continued on my path and became more intentional with it, it became more and more clear. And I knew that it was not a negotiable. My soul's path, my calling, or passion, whatever you want to call it, right? It's burning. That was the light that was burning inside of me. I knew I was here to make a difference and do something. And it was bigger than just being a nurse. And nothing against the healthcare profession. We do amazing work, but we're overworked. And there's a place where we need to stand up for ourselves, where we care for people, but we must care for ourselves. Otherwise, there's this whole pandemic of burnout out there that people don't choose to talk about. We just wear this mask on our face. That was me, right? Back then, like as a nurse, like I wasn't happy and all this, but I put a really strong mask on. And I think there's a lot of people out there are doing that as well, especially in the clients that I work with is very, very, yeah, they wear the mask on that they don't realize they're even wearing anymore. And so I help people take off that mask.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously, I'm resonating with everything that you're sharing because we do have a lot of similarities, even like down to a drug-free birth process. And yeah, maybe not necessarily always knowing where this impulse is coming from or being able to define or verbalize it, but also just figuring out like that when you do align with your inner voice and your authenticity, it actually feels better, life feels better, and the depression, and anxiety and the negative things like fall away when you start to walk along that path with the breadcrumbs and start following it. So for you, I'm also interested to find out where you kind of drew the energy and the strength and the motivation to like continue following the crumbs, and I know you mentioned that you became a millionaire, right? So it's like, how did you reconcile, the money or the energy or the time that you were investing in like this self-development? You have maybe money over here and I don't know at which point you got the money, right? But where did you draw upon to get these resources and the support that you needed to get to where you are?
Yeah, like I honestly the drive, like the energy, the motivation when you're already stressed, what like honestly, if I had a tip for everyone, where it starts on the journey of still, working in, the previous job, so to speak, that maybe you're, wanting to break free of, is that like following your pain. I know that sounds very interesting because a lot of us don't want to feel our pain. And that's actually what keeps us in our head and out of our bodies and our hearts to even feel deeply more of who we are, which brings more of the happiness and fulfillment and all these wonderful things that we hear about. So yeah, like it's like when you feel like you're shooting in the dark and it's like, it's like trust that, allow yourself to journey through the pain of what you're experiencing, the discomfort. You could grow as fast as you allow yourself to be uncomfortable with discomfort. And that's part of growing, that's part of change. And that's one thing I knew is that that love and care that I had for my patients at that time. was the fuel for me because I felt that wow, like the pain for me was like I could help them heal more and better. And if they saw it this way. And I realized that my gifts no longer fit the box of where I was working. And there's no judgment on the patients. That's just where they're at and they're healing, right? But I knew there was more. And so that when you start to see the disconnect within yourself between what is present in front of you, what you're capable of, and what is possible, and let yourself dream, that's that disconnect, that painful place that we don't always want to be in is what drove me. And I believe what drives a lot of people if we really examine the piece there. So yeah, that's what I would say for people like in this space, in this journey. That's what it felt for me. And it grows more and more. And of course, we bring things in that, numb us out. We watch Netflix for, for hours, maybe on an episode, and therefore we're not really present in how our feelings, or we have too much, wine or beer at the end of the weekend, or wine parties with the girls, whatever that is, right? Like, it's like speaking about how we're unhappy sometimes dispels the unhappiness. And so therefore it feels okay to stay where we are. Yeah. And, it's part of the journey. It's no judgment, but just recognizing when things are happening out of place from your true being and where is right, then yeah, that just creates more of that disconnect. And when you're present enough to feel it, that's what creates the drive.
Wow. I love that. That explanation honestly encompassed so many theories and philosophies, and it made me think of A Wrinkle in Time, if you remember that book or movie. And there was a phrase in there, the cracks are where the light shines in. So it's like our imperfections and our vulnerabilities can actually be made into strengths, right? And we can actually look at the other side of the coin and explore. And there's a lot of escapism going on, like you mentioned, like people don't want to go there because it is uncomfortable and it is sometimes painful. But unless you do go there, right, the only way out is through, and you have to feel it to heal it, sort of mentality. And if you keep putting a band-aid or looking the other way, it doesn't mean that you truly escape the problem. It's still persisting.
Yeah, and Marina, like I think you could relate to is like being in the allopathic framework, right? It's like we're trying to fix the pain, we're trying to heal the pain, cover the pain, the band-aid the pain. Yet here we are talking about you need to feel the pain. It's just not what we've been taught in the structure. And yeah, and you know what? This is where that authentic leadership of self comes in, right? Like knowing what feels right within ourselves, and yes, we're going to take steps that don't feel in alignment. And when you do that too long, it starts to eat away at your soul. It eats away at who you are because there's better in you, and that's why it is about stepping up for yourself. Like maybe it's not, it starts off with stepping up more in where you're working, but then you realize you're hitting this wall, and the wall is internal within yourself as well, and it's just reflecting everywhere in your life, and you can no longer, I can't do this anymore. There's a point that you hit that point, right? Yeah, and I will say it's not the easy journey, like the journey of a leader, of the strength of our heart. I would just say, like, the love or care you have for your child or a patient, like, can you put that amount of love for that light that is wanting to come through? And this is why people heal as deep as they allow themselves to feel and deserve. That's what creates that shift.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the belief of our capacity to heal is reflected in what we actually do feel. And what you're speaking on is so prevalent in the healthcare industry, like you said, and it's the healers that are healing other people, like tons and tons of patients that are dependent on these healers are themselves burned out, because it's really hard to be healthy when this system is unhealthy and the odds are really stacked against us, with the amount of hours and the shifts and lack of breaks. And all of this stress and pressure on a single practitioner, or professional that has so many things riding on them, right? And liability. And it's just not set up in the ideal way. And like for me, my mission is also to really focus our efforts on like a preventative and macro approach so that there's less people that are needing professional help out there, so that there's people that are self-sufficient and able to help themselves, and for both patients and providers, it's important to put the oxygen mask on first, because otherwise you can't help other people if you yourself are struggling.
Yeah, it's so true, right? And I will even like, want to emphasize this the space is that oftentimes when we are not deepening this self-love, self-deservingness level in ourselves, it's really difficult to get out of that, what the where you feel stuck per se. Like very much like someone who is in an abusive relationship, they will keep letting the abuse happen until there's something in ourselves that we put our foot down. There's something more important than self, often a child. That love, that similar amount of love, we got to learn how to give that to ourselves. That's what actually creates I call it energy shift, to want to do something different. Otherwise we will play the cycle in a while, for a long time. And so, yeah. And so that's where I just want to really emphasize this piece, because I know a lot of people get stuck here. And I just want to give a little tidbit on where to look and where to feel. So,
Yeah. And we both utilize a system called positive intelligence. And one of the first powers that we develop using that system is empathy. So that's kind of what you're speaking to, where it's so easy sometimes to have empathy for our patients and especially for our children, but it's not as easy to have that compassion for yourself. And so it does take like building that muscle and that awareness for you to start making different choices, right? So that's really important. And I also would like to go back to, first of all, congratulate you on becoming a millionaire, right? Like that's amazing. When I learned that, I was like, wow. And then you still yet, aren't just stopping there. So you're still continuing on to build, this business and help people in all these ways. So, outside of money, right, as a driver, it's like, why not just like kick back and just enjoy your millions?
like for me, like when I made my millions, I wasn't happy still. And I feel like I see a lot of people that are striving for that next achievement and goal, whether that's money, whether that's another designation, whatever that is. It's like people are not authentically in abundance. And so for a lot of big part of my soul's path is to walk people to develop this emotional abundance within self. Because a lot of people don't actually know what that feels like. And therefore it's really difficult to create that abundance and flow when you don't even have some sort of like, foundation for what it feels. And so we're recreating the past. And so that's why I feel really passionate about helping people take off this mask through a face analysis, and not to do it in a way where I'm just telling them what this means on their face, but to help someone actually drop into their body and their heart to really see themselves for who they are and to feel and have empathy for everything that they've gone through that shows up on their face and body. Um, this is a very important piece because when we are not feeling, we can't feel the abundance. You see how this works? Like our ability to feel is our ability to attract. And many people are, stuck in feelings and not leading their emotions and leading their energy. And so this is a big part of my mission here. So I don't, it's not that to me is not sufficient in my purpose to just land on money and just let it be. Yeah, so that's why I keep going. Because it's not my ultimate calling still, it's like, the job, our passionate job is the one that we'll do whether we have money or not, right? So that's what I feel. And I believe there's more wealth, in the sense that if we create more wealth, we could help more people. It's just how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And let's say that louder for the people in the back, right? It's money is one of those things that is just a moving goalpost. Like, I'll be happy when I have this much money or when I have this much. And like, no matter how much money you have, you're always like, spending, buying more things, like getting a different caliber, maybe status changes, but it doesn't get to that essential core desire of self-actualization. It's more you know, like a marker, right? And so once you have a certain level, anything beyond that level doesn't really give you more happiness or satisfaction. And there's deeper desires that your soul is probably like knocking and asking you to go towards that is outside of the money. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And also you mentioned the face analysis that you do that I really want to explore with you next, because I watched one of your master classes and I believe you have a special offer for people who are watching this podcast that I'd love you to share about. And from like a Chinese medicine perspective, I use like certain face analysis techniques myself, but this truly blew me away and took it to a whole other level. So please talk to us about your process.
Yeah, like essentially I just invite someone to send me their pictures and I find I can see way more when people send me pictures and I can zoom in and see all the lines. Yeah, and essentially yes, it talks a lot about our personality, our face. And a lot of things that are happening in our body also show up in our face in the sense of chronic conditions. And I think coming from allopathic framework, we often think of the body as separate. We hear about the body, mind, heart, soul connection. However, like face and body analysis really brings it to the next level of making these deeper connections, because we could get it intellectually, as I mentioned, is very different from actually being in your body, embodying it. And so, yeah, very much like, and I wish I had a picture here to show you my before and after when I burned out versus after, because it highlights a lot of shifts in my face where my entire face shape changed and my entire, like the amount of space up here in the mental zone and also our connection with our intuition and things like that. It enlarged because and opened up because I was seeing things in a limited way, and then my eyes got bigger because this is our heart, this is where our seat of our soul, so to speak. And so, yeah, and I meet a lot of people where, we go through this and sometimes they're aware of themselves and sometimes they don't realize their strengths and gifts. And so that's a gap that I bring people towards, or they know it, but they're not actually letting it in. And the next piece of that, besides looking at the actual analyzing of features, is that I split their face in half and I put two left sides and two right sides together. And this helps me see the left side is their private face. What we, that emotional, more feminine, private side of us. And the right side is that part of us that we show the world. And so, I help people step into their authentic leadership. So I help them see where they may be misaligned from their inner world versus the outer world. And this helps people see, like, a lot of times when we step into something new, it's like, oh, I can't do that. They feel like this imposter syndrome. And so when we are out of alignment and we're not allowing ourselves to be our true selves, we feel like an imposter. We feel like, oh yeah, that's not me, that's them. There's all these languaging that transforms to and how we actually see ourselves and the relationship we have with ourselves. So I help support to shift that relationship to bring alignment. And face analysis is really equivalent to, other counselors and therapists that have taken psychosomatics. It's equivalent of something like 4 to 6 sessions of regular therapy, so to speak, because it's literally all written here. And it's really literally about coming face to face and allowing yourselves to receive ourselves. That's what I walk someone through in a face analysis, back to themselves, and really to stop running away from who they truly are.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, I can't wait to share that masterclass with our listeners. So we'll drop the link down in the show notes. And for those of you watching in Facebook, you can get the link in the comments as well. And Tammy, I want to just thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your process with us. I think it's absolutely fascinating and something that a lot of people are probably not aware of. And it sounds like, it is a very much intentional and accelerated path to coming face to face, right? And facing off with yourself and figuring out and really like on a body and soul level, like merging that mind body connection and being that bridge for yourself through this process. So I can't wait, for more people to learn about this and get their hands on this training. And if you have just a couple more minutes, I'd love to do a rapid fire round of questions with you.
Oh, okay. Sure.
All right, awesome. Well, question one, I always like to ask everybody, what's your number one advice to improve somebody's quality of life right now?
Hmm. Yeah. You know what? I would say literally just accept what's happening in front of you. Because a lot of times when we are living life, it's like we're either not actually receiving what the good things are happening, or there's, negative things happening in our life that we're unhappy about, but we're not letting ourselves feel. And so if we just let ourselves accept it in the moment, allow it to be real for us, that actually is a great shift in the moment that can increase your quality of life right in that present moment and deepen your presence with self. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And it certainly reflects what we've been talking about. And this next question is also because we talked about these topics. So if you find somebody does suffer from imposter syndrome, let's say, and they have this desire, to get outside the box, but they find themselves like holding themselves back, what breadcrumb would you give them so that they could take that first step?
It's funny, like it's still the first thing that really comes up, and it's like the root cause of everything really comes back to how much we love and accept ourselves. And so can you take that first step into loving and accepting yourself and understanding that all the voices in your head are not you, and choose the voice that is loving?
I love that. Choose
Yeah.
the thing that makes you feel good, right? It's like it can be so simple, but we overcomplicate it. So the last couple of questions are going to just be fun. What is your favorite hobby and your favorite thing to eat?
My favorite hobby, like honestly, I love just getting together with my friends, and we usually do this thing where we ask each other a question. We pull some oracle cards. Like I'm really kind of into that, and just like sometimes it's like a walk in nature where we ask a question and like it gets answered. And I just love the magic in that. And yeah, just being with my soul and like sharing that connection with people. To me, like that's definitely kind of a hobby. I do that myself as a hobby too, but I love it when I'm connecting with my friends. So I definitely, that's a hobby that I definitely create time for at least once a month, when I'm not doing it by myself. And what do I like to eat, right?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is like, you know what? When me and my husband go travel, we always miss the multicultural food in Vancouver. And we had this conversation. It's like, what if, we can only have one type of food? Which one would we be happy with? And we had to go with Chinese because there was like a good amount of vegetables in it. And there was also a lot of different variety of sauces, and we like the sauces and flavor. So I would say Chinese food.
I love that. Yeah. And if you follow the TCM model, there's, the five flavor theory and all of that. So it makes absolute sense to just kind of make sure that you are tantalizing and utilizing all of your senses to bring that most like robust experience. So I think that's a perfect answer and solution. And finally, Tammy, I would love to just close this wonderful episode where you just brought so much heart and an amazing energy and wisdom with sharing how people can learn more about you and your work and get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. I am basically on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, but essentially, you could also email me at Tammy at Path to the Heart. So TAMMY, at path to the heart, .com is essentially how it sounds. And yeah, we get on a connection call and we just see where you're at with things, and talk through what is needed. And if it's opportunity to share more wisdom, and let you on your way, or as an opportunity to perhaps work together. And so I put that out on the table as well, because a lot becomes clearer when we talk it out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the work that you do and that you're bringing to the world, how you're forming people one at a time. And, I hope that we continue to collaborate and connect because there's so many synergies here. And I'll be dropping your beautiful website and masterclass and all your links in the show notes for our folks. Have a great day, Tammy.
Thank you.